The Tea Party staged a vigorous comeback last night, defeating an iconic Midwestern Republican.
Thanks so much. Well, good luck. Thank you very much.
Indiana voters have sent Richard Lugar to the U.S. Senate 6 times since 1977, but his 7th try was not the charm.
Hoosier Republican primary voters have chosen their candidate for the United States Senate. I congratulate Richard Murdock on his victory in a hard-fought race.
The 80-year-old Lugar was crushed by State Treasurer Richard Murdock, losing by more than 20 points and winning only 2 of the state's 92 counties. The Tea Party-backed Murdock said Lugar was out of touch with his home state and had grown too close to Democrats in Washington. But Lugar, who has made his reputation mainly on matters of foreign policy, said such cooperation is needed now more than ever.
We are experiencing deep political divisions in our society right now, and these divisions have stalemated progress in critical areas. But these divisions are not insurmountable, and I believe that people of goodwill, regardless of party, can work together for the benefit of our country.
Democrats who worked with Lugar in the Senate praised him today.
Dick argued that bipartisanship isn't an end in itself, and it's sometimes mistaken for centrism and compromise, when in fact it's really the way that what he called being a constructive public servant. It's the way a constructive public servant approaches his or her job, with self-reflection, discipline, and faith in the goodwill of others.
Republicans were largely silent, but not Richard Murdock. At his victory rally, Murdock said Hoosiers were not voting against Lugar. They were voting for a different approach to governing.
This race is not about animosity. It's about ideas. It is about the direction of the Republican Party. It is about the direction of our country.
Murdock also pledged to help alter that direction.
Hoosier Republicans want to see the Republicans inside the United States Senate take a more conservative track, and we're looking forward to helping them do that.
The departure of yet another mainstream moderate could further alter the Senate landscape this fall. Democrats are defending 23 seats in November, Republicans only 10. The most hotly contested races for both parties are underway in Massachusetts and Nevada. President Obama won Indiana in 2008, but the state is up for grabs once again this fall when Murdock will face Democrat Joe Donnelly, a 3-term congressman. With more on how Lugar was defeated and what it means, we turn to Greg Fettig, co-founder of Hoosiers for a Conservative Senate, and Brian Howey, a political analyst and author of the Howey Politics Indiana newsletter. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you in Indianapolis there tonight. Brian Howey, what happened last night? Your poll that came out, I guess, last Friday showed a 10-point gap, but by the time it was all said and done last night, it was a 20-point drubbing.
Yeah, well, we were in the field in late March, and Senator Lugar had a 7-point lead, but it was at 42%. And of course, you know, any incumbent, particularly somebody who's been there for 3 decades, that's that far south of 50% is in big trouble. And certainly the poll that we released, Howey DePaul poll that we released last Friday, had Richard Murdock up 10%. And our Democratic pollster, Fred Yang, basically said, you know, the bottom could drop out on Senator Lugar, and that's certainly what happened. I mean, I don't think anybody was predicting that 20% margin, but we knew it had a good chance to grow.
How much of the bottom dropping out was caused by a change of mood in the Indiana electorate this year, and how much of it was self-inflicted by Dick Lugar himself?
Well, it's probably a little bit of a lot of things. His age, 80 years old, his longevity, the fact that in our March poll, Congress had a 10% approval rating among Hoosier voters. Those are all problems. I got to give the Tea Party credit. They came up with a candidate. They kept the field restricted to one challenger. And then the Lugar campaign really didn't handle the residency issue very well. That was in the headlines for about 6 weeks, and it fed right into Richard Murdock's narrative. And so all those things, it was kind of like, you know, the classic death by a thousand nicks.
1,000 nicks. Greg Fettig, let's talk about what the Tea Party did in this case. Was this an anti-Lugar vote in the end, or was it a pro-Murdock vote, or neither?
Well, actually, I mean, we believe we have an excellent candidate with Richard Murdoch. He really espouses what the Tea Party believes, and that's back to constitutional conservatism. And it's not so much it was strictly anti-Richard Lugar, it was anti-establishment moderates, and like it or not, our country politically is polarized. That's fact of the matter, where not only are we fighting for the heart and soul of the America that we see and should be based on the Constitution, but also within the GOP. So what you saw last night was really a purity purging of that. And he's commended by many as one that does reach across the aisle, but unfortunately in our mind, that's a one-way road. The other side, the Democrats, don't seem to do that, and in fact they advocate that, but in their mind that we surrender, we being the Republicans would surrender to their ideals. So you think that's just a society with, I'm sorry?
I was just saying, so you think polarization is a good thing?
No, not necessarily. It's just the fact of what faces. It's a reality today in American politics, and I believe it's been perpetuated by one party, but to reach across the aisle and work with them when they're not working, them being the Democrats, they're not working, reciprocating. So, like it or not, it's the sad state of American politics, but until one political ideology or the other wins, that's just the way it's going to be.
Dick Lugar had a reputation, Mr. Fettig, for being an expert on foreign policy matters. Do you think that made no dent whatsoever with the electorate in a year when the economy is driving things?
Well, here in Indiana, overall, it probably did not. In the Tea Party, there are very well-versed people within the movement that does matter. I mean, the START Treaty we weren't happy with, and we think that's an old-fashioned 1980s approach to a completely different scenario what we see today. But bottom line, it's the economic crisis the country is, the debt crisis that we face. We are going on 4 years now in this crisis with no end in sight. Senator Lugar, when he first was elected to office, the national debt was around $700 billion, and now it's at $16 trillion. So I really don't, and most of my peers within the movement don't see how the same thing is going to get different results. So it was really time for a change.
Brian Howey, how much of a role did outside money play in this campaign? There was a lot of money coming into the Tea Party groups. There was a lot of money obviously being spent by an incumbent senator. Did it shape what happened?
It absolutely did. I mean, we're looking at, I've heard anywhere from $3 to $4 million that came in. It seemed to me like Richard Murdoch kind of subcontracted his campaign out to the NRA, FreedomWorks, and Club for Growth. They did a lot of bundling, a lot of direct mail, a lot of TV purchases. I'm not sure Richard Murdoch could have pulled this off if he didn't have all the outside money coming in, and that concerns me. On one hand, we have incumbents who seem impervious to defeat, and yet on the other hand, we seem to be replacing it with a Citizens United decision in which a certain opaqueness has come over the process, and I think it's going to really cause some problems down the road as this trend spreads to more states and more Senate seats.
Mr. Fettig, as a beneficiary of some of that money, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to disagree with that because Senator Lugar himself had a lot of outside money. He's fundraisers in Washington and New York City. He did have super PACs outside our borders that contributed to his campaign. As a senator, his votes don't just affect the citizens of Indiana, they affect all American citizens. The national debt crisis, the bailouts, all the taxpayers across the United States are liable for that debt. So to say that nobody outside Indiana should have any influence whatsoever, I just don't believe in that.
Brief answer from both of you, if you will. Is Indiana in play for the fall, starting with you, Mr. Fettig?
No, absolutely not. Indiana is a red state. I truly believe President Obama won't be voted in Indiana in the fall. Joe Donnelly's got a limited following and name recognition, and we as in the Tea Party are not done after yesterday. We continue to march forward and fully anticipate to be victorious in November as well.
Brian Howey, quickly.
Yes, Howie DePaul had the race tied 35% each for Joe Donnelly and Richard Murdoch. Out of the past 24 years, we've had 16 years of Democratic governors, and Evan Bayh held this seat for 2 terms. A Democrat can do it.
Brian Howey, Greg Fettig, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.